Welcome to HortTube. In this video, we have moved 3 native plants from our garden here in Raleigh, North Carolina, over to the new native plant garden on the city's property, where we have, there's a playlist for this if you want to go back and look, about us announcing this project and then putting these wood chips out. Now we're moving, we had a couple of, and I'll tell you each one as we go why we moved it over here. Still lots of natives over there, but we did move 3 native things over here to start this project. I guess, I don't know if before or, I guess, before you will have seen this, we've actually gone down to Superior Plants, and Jason's donated a bunch of stuff. I don't think I'm gonna put that stuff in the ground for a couple of weeks. But we went ahead and moved a few deciduous things that are dormant during the wintertime with no leaves on them, on a cloudy, cold morning in February. Kind of the perfect time to do this because it's gonna be the least amount of stress. So I really didn't want to prune this ruby spice clethra because it does bloom on old wood, and I can come in here and take a third of it back, and it would probably overall maybe transplant better overall. I don't really know. I don't think it needs it. It's February. It's not under any kind of stress. I will say though, in a video maybe a month ago about root pruning plants, I root pruned this. So this, the American beautyberry you're about to see, and the viburnum nudum were root pruned in a video. So we went around and basically just cut the surface roots all the way around and then left it be. Waited over, I think it was probably over a month ago, and then moved them over here today. Okay. One thing, I'm not adding any amendments here, but I am getting these wood chips out of the way and making sure the plant's in good contact with the soil. You'll notice when you're digging up lots of plants in your garden, sometimes you'll get pretty deep root balls on things where things are able to get down in there a little deeper. But a lot of these plants have very shallow, kind of almost pancake-like root systems on them. And 2 of the 3 here do. The American beautyberry has a deeper root system. You can maybe able to see that when I was digging it out over there. The clethra and the viburnum nudum we're going to talk about have very like a pancake root system. So we just want to go kind of wide with them. If I was cutting them back if I was moving them with leaves on them, and sometimes you have to move something when you have to move something, I would have cut them back, okay? But I chose not to cut this back because I'd like for it to flower this first season. These flower May and June typically, a little later than some of our other flowering shrubs do, and hopefully when we have the open garden here, you know, this thing will have some flowers on it. And there is virtually no native shrub to the Southeast United States that gets more pollinators on it than clethra. And the cool thing about clethra, when I'm talking about pollinators, is I'm not talking about the same 3 butterflies and the same 3 bees, you know, including, you know, that you see on everything. When you look at this thing and look at the flowers, there's all these weird wasps and moths and such strange things come from miles away to go to the clethra that pollinate the clethra. All 3 of these items and a lot of our native shrubs to the southeast can colonize. Okay, so when I dug this out over there, I left a few pieces in place, and it's definitely going to try to come back from that. I can dig those out, and in fact, I could probably go back over there now and pull one up and plant it somewhere. You know, it's you know, good for, you know, you can just you can desucker them if you want to, or again, you can just dig them up and replant them if you want to make more of them. Some of these native shrubs, and I'll definitely talk about this on the viburnum nudum, you're actually best when you do prune them. I'm giving this thing enough space. The reason it had to move over here is because it was next to the driveway and it was getting too big. And we've seen these ruby spice clethra 10 feet tall. So now it's in a spot where it can get 10 feet tall. It's got plenty of sun to stay full. But when I prune this thing in the future, rather than top pruning on it, I'll probably just track the oldest growth down to the bottom and cut them out at the base. So you can start to see after 4 or 5 years, some of the oldest wood gets a little gnarly down at the bottom. I can saw those off right to the bottom, and I can allow the suckers, a couple suckers, to take its place over time, and it tends to get the best flowers on wood that's like between 3 and 5 years old. Okay, so that's kind of the best way to prune one of these, is to give it room so I don't have to top prune it ever, and then just prune them down to the ground in the future as the stems get older on it. But again, I pulled back the wood chips, I got it down in the ground just as much as it, you know, I made contact with the soil basically. You'll see I always turn the shovel over and I tamp with the bottom of the shovel just to kind of pack soil back around those roots, because if you just set it in there, because of the shape of it, it has a curve underneath the bottom of where I dug it out. Because of that, I got to get soil underneath that a little bit. So that's why I use the back of the shovel just to tamp that soil underneath it. And then I put wood chips back, and they look thick, but they're not. They're actually, I faded them out right at the base. So there's no wood chips up on the wood at all. And it's in good contact with the soil. This soil's different, okay, than if you had new construction or someplace that's newer construction where the soil hasn't really rebounded from all the equipment on it and everything. I might amend the soil some, but I'm not going to do any amending over here. This has been under weeds for 75 years. So basically lawnmower, boom, 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 back and forth through here. It's got some, it's gravelly, a little lower, which I don't mind rocks at all. They're not fun to dig in, but they're not hurting the plants. But that soil is actually pretty rich from all the cuttings. You know, it hasn't been bagged over here. So just as it's been mowed, the cuttings have built up over time. And this soil's not bad. It's, again, not the easiest thing to dig in because it had gravel down there at some point. So I'm not going to amend it. The soil looks fine. I think it's totally fine. There's a clay base. If I get down there far enough, you can see where the real clay starts down there a little bit lower. The roots will have access to that clay, but they're sitting up above it just a bit, and then the wood chips are thinned out. So let's look at the other two. This is a white Calicarpa Americana that I got from Buddy Lee. We've talked about it before, and I just call it Calicarpa Americana Alba, but it's actually a selection that Buddy made because it's really super compact. And we're able to have this thing, we'll cut it down like this because it blooms on new growth. So this is one that you can cut back like a butterfly bush almost and allow it to come back in your ornamental garden and be a little bit more tame. Over here, I can make the decision now to let it become a small tree if we wanted to, or a very large shrub or small tree. We'll figure that out as we go. I think we're going to put some sort of ornamental tree in this line here. So I don't know, I may continue to size control this Calicarpa in the future, but this is a good time to cut it back and it's a good time to move it. So I just went ahead and did both on that one. I do get the occasional comment about eye protection. So when you're down here doing these kinds of things and your eyes are around it, you may want to wear eye protection. I'm not very good about showing that as an example. But when I am pruning one of these things, that's probably the time to do it because you're going straight at something and sometimes you can't see it, before it's poked you in the eye. But again, this one had a slightly deeper root mass on it, so I went a little bit deeper. But again, these wood chips are just fading out right at the base. I don't have them, I'm not burying that plant in any way. It's actually sitting up above the grade over here just a little bit, and it'll root down into this. This edge right here is gonna stay wetter than the rest of the garden because any water from the next 3 houses up is coming this direction, and these this organic material is definitely going to slow this water down. So it is going to be moist out here, more moist than the regular garden or our other garden over here. This will just come right back out of this and be in full bloom and do its thing just like it did any other year. It won't miss a beat. It'll get rooted back in pretty quickly. It's rained a bunch this week, but I still need to bring a water hose over here and settle this just a bit. I packed that soil around it some to make sure I was trying to get rid of the air pockets as much as possible. There's still some air pockets in there, so I can water it in to take care of that. We're gonna fertilize the entire garden in the next few weeks. And so when I fertilize the entire garden, it'll get fertilized just with everything else, but not going out of my way to fertilize it. Nor would I, no matter what time of year I was moving it, I would not fertilize it when I moved it because I don't want to push it, right? I don't want to go, hey, I just ripped you out of the ground and drug you over here, now grow. That's not going to be potentially not a good outcome of trying to force growth on it. So I just happen to be fertilizing in February and it's dormant, so it won't hurt it. This Viburnum nudum is another one, and this is a tricky one to prune, just to figure out when to prune. I think overall the best way to prune a Viburnum nudum, which does sucker, great native Viburnum, and it's going to get more sun over here. It was leaned out in the garden over there. That's the reason we moved this one. The American Beautyberry, it was over the fence out there. That's the reason it came over here. It's just sprawling pretty wide. But this one, we had the perfect spot over there except for that oak shades it out too much, and it was just leaning so far forward, and we're getting very sparse flowers on it, getting very sparse fruit on it, which is the purpose of having it out here, is for pollinators and for a butterfly that takes advantage of these. moving this tall of a plant, if I did it any other time of the year, I would definitely be pruning it, and maybe I should be pruning it now because of the root system that I got on it. I made a mistake with this plant. I ran a water hose from the house to the back of the garden back here so we'd have access to water. And when I ran that water hose back there, I ran it right across the top of the root ball of this. And so when I was digging it out over there, I struggled. I did more damage to this root ball than I would have otherwise because that water hose was in the way of it. And so because of the size of the root ball that I ended up getting out on it, I probably could cut this thing back a bit. I'm hopeful because it has 2 full more months before it leaves out that it can get itself rooted in a bit and it'll be fine. If I see any kind of dieback up here in the top or any problems with it, I'll go ahead and cut it. I'll just sacrifice it at that point, cut the thing a third back or something. We'll see. I'm hoping it'll just transplant over here. But this is another one that I would prune old stems out of. So as these, one of the older stems here really starts to kind of tire in this plant, you can cut it this high from the ground. And then some sucker like this one, this one laid on the ground right here and rooted in. You see that sucker right there? Or this is not actually a sucker. This was just a limb that laid on the ground and then mulch covered it. See those roots? I could plant this one into a container or in the ground and it would start growing pretty quickly. Again, we've had tons of rain, so I didn't need to pre-water it. Make sure that they're already moist when you're about to move them and the space that you're moving them to is kind of moist. And again, I'm not piling a bunch of wood chips, and I wouldn't move perennials over here right now, herbaceous perennials, just because these wood chips are so thick. This is gonna settle a lot. But by the time this thing's leafing out in 2 months, these wood chips are gonna be potentially only half the thickness that they are right now. They've already settled from the rain we've had in the last couple days, and hopefully this ground's gonna start eating them pretty quickly. All the life down here will start eating them pretty quickly and start to turn the engine on for the soil over here. But there you go, there's the Viburnum nudum. I'll monitor this one and decide whether or not I should have cut it back, and I'll cut it back if I need to. Hoping not to, hoping to get some flowers out of it. I was able to correct the lean, in the process of bringing it over here. So now it's nice and straight, and it's got great form, right? It's really a great looking ornamental plant, with or without leaves on it. It just needs some light so that it can grow upright like this. I like the upright narrow habit on them. There are a couple named varieties of Viburnum nudum out there. Winter Thur is one of them that you'll probably run into out in the world. That's a nice ornamental selection for our ornamental gardens, because that's, some of these natives, that Calicarpa americana is a selection that Buddy Lee made because he's looking for a more compact form, so people would add them to their ornamental gardens, because our native Calicarpa americana can get, again, big and, just a giant plant that works its way all over the place. So there's a lot of selecting going on to stop them from colonizing as bad, make them more compact, make them where homeowners don't necessarily have to spend so much time working on them to have these great natives in their garden. So there you go, first 3 plants in the native garden, and we got quite a few more that'll go in over the next few weeks. Thanks for watching.